This horrendous abuse of power is the latest in a long series of witch hunts.
Donald Trump attacks the decision to appoint a special counsel to oversee investigations into the former U.S. president. I'm Rob Matheson. This is Al Jazeera Live from Doha. Also coming up.
I'm Florence Louis at a polling station in Kuala Lumpur. 21 million people are eligible to vote in what's been described as Malaysia's most competitive elections.
Ukraine's capital faces a complete power shutdown as Russia keeps hitting energy sites with airstrikes. And bad blood in U.S. business. The founder of a failed testing startup is sentenced to prison for defrauding investors. We're going to begin in the U.S. Donald Trump is criticizing the decision to appoint a special counsel to oversee investigations into the former president. Jack Smith is a one-time war crimes prosecutor, and he'll lead probes into Trump's handling of classified documents after leaving office, as well as his attempt to interfere in the results of the 2020 presidential election. Smith's appointment comes 3 days after Trump announced he will run for president again in 2024.
This is a rigged deal, just as the 2020 election was rigged, and we can't let them get away with it. We can't do it. We cannot let this happen to our country. I've been going through these investigations and hoaxes and scams from the day I came down the escalator at Trump Tower, and you'd really say enough is enough. Got to get back to work. Got to prove that we have a great country again, because right now it's not great. Right now it's a laughingstock all over the world.
Earlier, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland said he'd made the decision so the Justice Department could remain independent.
Based on recent developments, including the former president's announcement that he is a candidate for president in the next election, and the sitting president's stated intention to be a candidate as well, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint a special counsel. Such an appointment underscores the department's commitment to both independence and accountability in particularly sensitive matters. It also allows prosecutors and agents to continue their work expeditiously and to make decisions indisputably guided only by the facts and the law.
Heidi Jo Castro's got more on Donald Trump's reaction to the announcement.
There had been reports in U.S. media that Trump's advisors had said not to speak about this so quickly, as the decision to appoint the special counsel was just announced hours ago. However, Trump went ahead and spoke at what appeared to be a gala at Mar-a-Lago. He repeated many conspiracy theories that have been debunked, and he went on to call the appointment of the special counsel a, quote, horrendous abuse of power. And he said it was the latest in a series of witch hunts from Democrats, while himself he called one of the most honest and innocent people ever in our country. That's what he said, word for word. This was not a legal defense of any type. And so just from hearing it, and as he made this long speech to his supporters, it was perhaps apparent why some of his lawyers would have advised against it. Now, he is claiming that this is Joe Biden's doing, the current U.S. president. The White House has said that there was no involvement whatsoever in this decision to appoint a special counsel to investigate Trump. And in fact, it may be that President Biden didn't even know that this decision, that this announcement was being made today.
In Malaysia, people are casting their votes in what's expected to be the tightest general election since independence in 1957. Malaysians are choosing from 945 candidates. 4 coalitions are hoping to win the 222 parliamentary seats at stake. Florence Louis has more from a polling station in Kuala Lumpur.
Well, it's highly competitive because voters have more than 2 strong contenders to choose from. Now, one of them is the National Front. It's led by UMNO Party, which is, I suppose the best way to describe it is the grand old party of Malaysia. Now, they've been dominant in Malaysia politics until they were finally defeated in the last election in 2018. And then there's the opposition, the Alliance of Hope, led by former Deputy Prime Minister turned opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim. Now, the opposition has been making steady gains, and they won the last election 4 years ago. And then you have the National Alliance, a relatively newcomer, but old faces. Their main parties are the Malaysian Islamic Party and also Bersatu, a splinter group of UMNO. Now, all these parties have had a stint in governing Malaysia, so voters will also be able to choose to decide who to vote for based on each party's performance in government. Now, complicating matters is the fact that there are 6 million new voters because of automatic voter registration and because the voting age has been lowered to 18. It's not a small number, 6 million, considering this is a population of around 30 million people. Analysts say this group could be the wild card that could swing these elections. So they're not just the most competitive, but also being described as one of the most difficult to predict.
The first train to newly liberated Kherson has left Ukraine's capital, restoring a crucial rail link between the two cities. The journey is being called the Train to Victory, and it's going to arrive in the regional capital on Saturday. Workers have repaired tracks and carriages which were damaged by Russian forces. The majority of Ukraine's rail network stayed in operation during the war despite repeated attacks. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Prime Minister says waves of Russian missile strikes have crippled almost half the country's energy infrastructure. Officials in Kyiv are warning that a complete shutdown of the city's grid is possible. The UN's warning of a humanitarian emergency because of power and water shortages. Kyiv's Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says preparations are being made for rolling blackouts throughout winter. Asad Beg has more from Lviv, where temperatures have dropped and it started snowing.
In some places, the temperature is already below zero, and that's a major concern for authorities here. Now, President Vladimir Zelensky has said there's about 10 million people without electricity as this snow falls. The main electricity provider has said that they're trying to keep the blackouts short and on schedule. Many people around the country have been experiencing those electricity blackouts as Russian airstrikes have targeted energy infrastructure. In the last few days, some of the biggest missile barrages this country has faced since the start of the war, and allegedly one of those missiles, at least according to the Ukrainians, went over into Poland and killed 2 people. The Ukrainians are adamant that it was a Russian missile. Now we hear from the foreign minister here, who says that they are now a part of the investigation and they want to be open and constructive. But what we're hearing from Poland, the United States and NATO is that it is unlikely that that was a Russian missile that went across the border into Poland and killed 2 people. It's more likely that it was one from the Ukrainian air defense. But the investigation isn't finished, but Ukraine is adamant that it was a Russian missile. Elsewhere in the country, in the Zaporizhzhia region, the missile strike on Thursday, the death count for that when it hit a residential building has gone up to 10. And the nuclear power plant, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which the Russians occupy, the IAEA has passed a 3rd resolution urging Russia to stop its actions against and at that plant.
Kenya's former president and Rwanda's leader have agreed that fighters should withdraw from captured territory in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. M23 fighters have made major gains in recent weeks, advancing towards Goma. The Congolese government has accused Rwanda of supporting the group, but Kigali denies this. Hundreds of people have been killed and nearly 200,000 have been forced from their homes. Malcolm Webb reports.
Twizere Furaha was pregnant with twins when a bomb hit her house. Shrapnel was blasted into her leg and thigh, and she passed out. She was rescued and brought to this hospital, run by International Committee of the Red Cross, or ICRC, in Goma, in Democratic Republic of Congo. An emergency caesarean section saved Grace and Maurice, but they'll never know their father.
I was in our village, then the fighting started, and one of the bombs hit our house. My husband lost his legs and died. I was taken to a hospital nearby, but no one could help me, until I was brought here.
Congo's fighter jets have been bombing positions of M23, an armed group widely believed to be backed by Rwanda, although Rwanda denies it. More than 200,000 people have fled the fighting and M23's recent advances. The people here left everything behind when they ran. Life in the camps is tough and there hasn't been much help. Here they're lining up to register with the humanitarian agency, hoping that more help will come soon. But things are much worse for those who've been trapped by the fighting. Neither side lets people or even ambulances cross the front lines. Areas controlled by M23 have been cut off from humanitarian supplies. ICRC says the few health facilities that remain open in areas where there's fighting have no way to get medical supplies from Goma.
We have been told that there is a lot of wounded, but they just don't manage to reach Goma. A lot of health structures in the conflict area have been looted. A lot of health personnel have left the health structures, so people can't find health care.
It seems incredible that Jacques Semagori is alive. He's just 12 years old. He had multiple gunshot wounds in his chest and legs. UN peacekeepers found him on the roadside and brought him here.
We feel very traumatized by all of this. We're living in the camp in the rain without even plastic sheets for shelter. We're only asking for the people in power to bring peace so we can go home, because we're used to doing our own work and living by our own means.
Jacques and his uncle Hitimana are among the tens of millions of Congolese who don't benefit from the country's vast mineral wealth. And they're also among those who suffer the most in the seemingly endless conflicts for control of it. Malcolm Webb, Aljazeera, Goma, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Leaders from around the Asia-Pacific region are gathering in Bangkok for the second day of the APEC summit. The trade talks have been overshadowed by North Korea firing a ballistic missile on Friday. The US and South Korea held joint military drills a few hours after the launch. APEC leaders are also discussing inflation, climate change and the pandemic. Tony Cheng has more from outside the summit in Bangkok.
The fact that there's an announcement at all, I think is probably a good result. Yesterday we saw those sidebar meetings about North Korea, statements released by the United States and its allies condemning the firing of that intercontinental ballistic missile. We also saw a statement released by the APEC Secretariat about the war in Ukraine, but very much word for word, pretty much what we saw from the G20, that most of the countries here condemned the actions of Russia, but clearly not the acceptance of Russia and China, who are both represented here. I think we can expect some kind of communique at the end, but I think the big point of this meeting was that these people were able to come at all, and the fact that it wasn't overshadowed like the other two big summits we've seen in the past 7 days at ASEAN and the G20 in Bali by other issues, namely Myanmar and the war in Ukraine.
Thousands of Palestinians in Gaza are mourning victims of a fire which engulfed a residential building. 21 members of a family died while they were celebrating a birthday on Thursday. Let me give you a warning. Some of you may be upset by images in this report by Yumna El-Said.
Thousands march, carrying the bodies of 21 members of the Abu Raya family. All were killed by a fire in their home in Jabalia refugee camp. Most were children.
This tragedy has affected everyone. We slept through a terrible night. I came home and found my children crying out of grief and fear. May God have mercy on them. But everything that happens in Gaza is because of this blockade we live within.
The neighbors said the family had gathered to welcome home and celebrate the birthday of Mahir Abu Raya, who had just obtained his PhD degree overseas. But shortly after, neighbors heard screams and saw smoke billowing from the apartment's windows. Some people tried to enter the 3-story building, hoping to reach the family. But they were prevented by the intense heat, and many were injured.
The 21 members of the Abu Raya family have died in the fire. Now their bodies remain unseparated as they are buried here together in this cemetery.
Israel's 15-year siege of Gaza and its tight restrictions on the entry of equipment and material has left the civil defense and fire department in the occupied territory with limited sources. Eyewitnesses say that's a major reason none of the victims were saved. Police investigations also indicated petrol stored in the residential home fueled the fire that was caused by a gas leak. Most people in Gaza store fuel in their homes as winter approaches to provide heat during long power cuts.
We express our full solidarity with the entire Abu Raya family and their relatives, and we confirm that the unjust Israeli siege that caused a lack of capabilities with the civil defense and other departments is the major reason for the high number of victims in this tragedy.
The Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Palestinian factions in Gaza announced Friday would be a day of mourning for those who died. And they called for international pressure to end Israel's blockade of the Strip. Yumna Syed, Aljazeera, Gaza.
A plane has caught fire in Peru after hitting a fire truck on the runway of Lima's International Airport. 2 firefighters were killed when the LATAM Airlines plane crashed into the moving truck. 102 passengers and 6 crew members on board the aircraft have escaped unharmed. U.S. Silicon Valley entrepreneur Elizabeth Holmes has been handed a lengthy prison sentence for fraud. Her time as the CEO of blood testing company Theranos spawned documentaries, books and a television miniseries. Rob Reynolds reports.
Fame, disgrace, now prison. Formerly high-flying tech entrepreneur Elizabeth Holmes was sentenced to 11.25 years in federal prison on Friday. Holmes was convicted of fraud and conspiracy in January. In pronouncing sentence, Judge Edward Davila said, "This is sad because Ms. Holmes is brilliant. Failure is normal, but failure by fraud is not okay." Prosecutors had asked for 15 years in prison. Holmes's lawyers asked for a much lighter sentence of 18 months of home confinement. Before sentencing, Holmes apologized, saying she was devastated and full of regret. The 38-year-old has 1 small child and is expecting another baby. Holmes founded Theranos, a Silicon Valley startup that claimed to have perfected technology that could diagnose a multitude of diseases with a single drop of blood. But the technology never worked, a fact Holmes kept secret from wealthy investors like Fox owner Rupert Murdoch and Oracle's Larry Ellison. Holmes had a persuasive ability and was able to recruit figures like former U.S. Secretaries of State Henry Kissinger and George Shultz to sit on Theranos' board. Digging by investigative journalists eventually revealed Theranos' fakery, and the whole edifice collapsed 4 years ago. Prosecutors also asked for hundreds of millions of dollars in restitution, but the judge deferred a decision on that till later. At the height of her fame, Holmes's company was worth $9 billion. She hobnobbed with politicians, celebrities, and billionaires, and the media treated her to numerous adoring articles. Now it appears she will be spending time behind bars, although she's likely to appeal her sentence. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Los Angeles.
Twitter boss Elon Musk has summoned the company's software engineers for face-to-face meetings in San Francisco. In an email, Musk asked the workers to send him summaries of recent coding achievements. The meeting comes after he issued an ultimatum telling employees to agree to long hours at high intensity or to quit with 3-month severance pay. Hundreds of staff have reportedly left. In Mexico, many people are struggling with rising housing prices. Activists say the capital is attracting foreign remote workers, and that's driving up rents and forcing local people out. Manuel Rapla reports from Mexico City.
Demonstrators in Mexico City. They're protesting against rising costs of housing.
The increase in rent and housing prices is negatively affecting us as a local community.
This woman has asked us not to reveal her identity out of fear of reprisal. She says the housing crisis goes beyond increasing prices. After her apartment building signed a deal with the home share company Airbnb, she was given 5 days to move out. She says short notice evictions are becoming commonplace across the city.
This is a matter of human dignity. How can someone come to your home in the evening and say you have 5 days to vacate? What do they expect us to do?
In recent years, Mexico City has seen a large influx of foreign residents. The Mexican capital is now considered one of the top 5 cities in the world for remote workers. And an agreement signed last month between the city and Airbnb seeks to attract even more.
This is an invitation for workers from the whole world to come live in Mexico City, a city that has it all.
While the mayor's office says the city hasn't seen a causal link between more Airbnb rentals and higher rent prices, activists say a lack of regulation has allowed real estate companies to operate like a cartel.
Why a cartel? Because there is a fight over control of territory. We're talking about an urban war, where people are being forcibly displaced. This is an urban war, and money is winning.
Activists say the formula is simple. As Mexico has sought to attract remote workers with higher purchasing power, it's created more inequality for Mexicans. Protesters here in Mexico City say rent prices are so high, some are finding it hard to find affordable housing at all, pushing many outside the city limits. Residents who feel priced out of their own city are calling on the government to do more to guarantee affordable housing and protect the rights of tenants and homeowners. Manuel Rapalo, Aljazeera, Mexico City.
Okay, let's go to Madagascar now, where water is so scarce in its southern region that thousands of people have to walk hours just to find it. Nick Clark joined villagers on their 10-kilometre round trip to the nearest river.
It's as human as it comes, preparing food for your people. But in times of droughts, just getting to the point of adding water to the vegetables takes formidable effort. I meet with a family in the village of Andranomadio, who tell me this pumping station was built by the government to bring water up from the Mandare River 5 kilometers away. But in 2 decades, the valves haven't opened. The tank was never filled because the pipes were never laid.
They brought trucks and materials and built it, but then went away and never came back.
The irony is, Dane's family has taken residence in the pump house, but because of the drought, they've had to sell their possessions in order to eat. And now, every day, all ages set off to find water on the long walk to the Mandare River. And this is what tens of thousands of people across the region do. It's often a journey of several hours there and back. I went along with Suenzue and his brothers. The wind is searing and the sun saps your energy. And they do this day after day after day. We passed young children doing their bit for the village. And after 2 long hours, we arrive at the river. Its murky waters are life-saving, and containers are filled. Remember now, they have to return with 20, sometimes 40 litres of water on their backs.
We've never experienced anything like this. It's a very, very hard situation. There are no seasons anymore. It's just hot, dry and windy. That's why we have to come here to take water from the river.
Even the river has run dry in recent years, but rain in the far mountains has replenished its flow. And they come, man and beast. So this is effectively the kitchen tap for thousands and thousands of people. People who've walked for hours just to get their supplies. Water for washing, water for cooking, and water for drinking. And so the journey back home, up the valley, begins. And in the resolute determination of the villagers, you may wonder at the injustice of it all. People that did nothing to make global warming happen, being forced to live like this, year after remorseless year. Nick Clark, Al Jazeera, the Grand Sud, Madagascar.